Human Immunity by Shelby, Limm. So before we get into the PowerPoint, you need to know what is an infection. An infection comes in 4 different types: viral, bacterial, parasitic, fungi, and sometimes prion disease. Not all infections are giving symptoms, which means that they can be very hard to identify. There are also microorganisms that live in the body that are not infectious, like the bacteria in our mouth. Bacteria are single-celled organisms that are responsible for illnesses such as cellulitis and strep throat, UTIs and tuberculosis. Viruses are a lot smaller than bacteria, not technically alive themselves, which means that they rely on a host. They cause many diseases with a wide range of severity, from the common cold to COVID-19. Fungi are responsible for many surface skin disease, like ringworm. Fungi can also cause infections to the lungs or even the nervous system. Parasites are causes of conditions such as malaria, which are transmitted by a mosquito bite. Other parasites can be transmitted through human feces, like worms. But how do infections actually pass from one person to another? You have direct contact, which can be from mother to baby during the pregnancy. Indirect contacts would be like sneezing on a surface and touching the surface. Insect bite is when an insect bites you and you get such things as malaria. And then food contamination, like food poisoning from contaminated food. First line of defence against an infection. The body uses 3 lines of defence to battle infection. The first 2 lines are non-specific and the third is specific. The very first line of defence is the skin. As seen here, you can see how the skin is laid out. Their physical barriers is the epidermis, the dermis and the hydrodermis. The skin is the largest organ in the body, creating the physical and chemical barriers. The epidermis forms the outermost layer of the skin, as seen here. It's a protective layer against pathogens trying to enter within the body. It stops harmful organisms, toxins and chemical irritations entering the body, prevents water loss and blocks solar and bad radiation. Other physical barriers are the mucous membrane. The mucous membrane consists of a layer of epithelial cells bound by tight junctions. The epithelial cells create a moist and sticky substance called mucus, which covers and protects more fragile cell layers beneath it and traps debris of particular matter, including microbes. Mucus is found in the nose, saliva is in the mouth, mucus is in the lungs, and urinary and digestive tracts also have a way of getting rid of dust or moulds or things that we don't want in the body. Chemical barriers. A chemical barrier for the body's immune system is tears, saliva, respiratory tract, sweat, stomach acid, mucus and semen. The acid in sweat and in the stomach kills cellular pathogens, and there are antibacterial proteins in semen. An example of a chemical defence is tears. Foreign bodies that enter the eye are washed out by the tears. Tears contain a substance called lysosome, which has an antibacterial action and works to prevent the invasion and the infections by microbes. Second line of defence, the inflammatory response. The inflammatory response starts when a pathogen stimulates an increase of blood flow to the infected area. The area expands due to blood vessels going to the infected area. White blood cells leak from these vessels and invade the infected tissues. Phagocytes, which are white blood cells, flood and destroy the bacteria. This makes the area really swollen and red, which is called the inflammatory response. The area that is infected will be hot, which is another antibiotic response. Another second line of defence is phagocytes. Phagocytes are large white blood cells that surround microorganisms, absorb foreign materials and remove the dead cells. All of these cells are specialised and part of the immune system's mechanisms. They fight against infection, disease and other harmful substances. Phagocytes are cells with the ability to engulf and sometimes digest other cells, organisms or particles through the process called phagocytosis. Third line of defence, acquired immunity. Here is a diagram that shows what acquired immunity is. The third line of defence for the immune system is made up of cells that get rid of specific microorganisms. The specific cells are called dendritic cells. They are the communication point between the innate and adaptive cells. Macrophages sound an alarm and the dendritic cells travel to the site of infection. Along with other cells, The phagocytoses break off small parts of pathogens. The dendritic cells remove these parts and take them to the lymph nodes, where adaptive immunity begins. Cells of the immune system are usually T and B cells, which are natural killers of all pathogens. Role of different types of immune cells. There are three main categories for white blood cells: granulocytes, lymphocytes, and monocytes. Granulocytes are white blood cells with granules containing protein. There are three types of these types of white blood cells. Basophil. These are less than 1% of white blood cells within the body. They present themselves in large numbers when an allergic reaction could occur. Eosinophil is when a parasite infects the body. These cells will fight it. They also play a role in general immune responses and inflammatory responses. Neutrophil. These make up majority of the body's white blood cells. They enclose and destroy bad bacteria or fungi in the body. Another type of white blood cell is lymphocytes. These are B, T and killer cells. B produce antibodies, T recognise and remove the infection. These are memory cells. And natural killer cells are responsible for killing viral cells as well as cancer cells. Another type of white blood cell is monocytes. These make up just 2 to 8% of the body's white blood cells. They fight off chronic infections and destroy infectious cells. Immunoglobulins. According to Thermo Fisher Scientific Inc. 2021, immunoglobulins, also known as antibodies, are glycoprotein molecules produced by plasma cells. They act as a critical part of the immune system. The immune system's response by specifically recognising and binding to particular antigens such as bacteria or a virus and aiding in their destruction. They make up 20% of the protein in our blood. They are special proteins that have carbohydrates attached to them and their chains, known as glycoproteins. Their role is to maintain the body's immune system. They produce antibodies to fight against chemical substances, allergies, viruses and cancer. Breast milk, tears, saliva and gastric secretion all contain them. The main role is to produce an antibody, meditative response and link the foreign antigens. This kills microbes and stops the infection from spreading. Self-recognition and tolerance. Here is a diagram of the intrathymic injection of a donor antigen. Self-recognition and tolerance is the immune system's ability to recognise self-produced antigens that are not a threat and recognise foreign substances that could pose a threat at the same time. Self and non-self antigens. Your own cells are known as self-antigens. Those that do not originate from your body are non-self antigens. Self-antigens are important in blood cells, which means that you can only have a blood transfusion if you have the same antigens, so the same blood type. If it's not the same type of blood, the body will kill the antigens because they are not the same type. Non-self antigens are present in bacteria and viruses. They are also in blood and organs when having a transplant. White blood cells will activate when a non-self antigen is detected. Tolerance to own tissues and rejection of transplanted organs. Rejection of transplanted organs and tissues. Transplanting tissues that are not self-antigens can cause the body to reject them. This is called tissue rejection. There are two processes of this mechanism. Foreign MHC modules on transplanted tissues are identified by T helper cells, which process cytotoxic T cells, which destroy the tissue. Here on this diagram are potential transplantation reactions. On diagram A, donated tissues are not from an identical twin contain cellular MHC proteins that are recognised as foreign by the recipient's host. The tissue is then attacked by the host CTLs, resulting in damage and rejection. Diagram B. Donated tissues may also contain immune cells that react against the host antigens. Recognition of the foreign host by the donor's CTLs result in graft-reverse host disease. Here are two types of immune system disorders. Firstly, AIDS. HIV is the virus that causes the immune disorder AIDS. AIDS is a viral infection that destroys white blood cells and weakens the immune system. People with AIDS can't fight off other infections that other people can. This type of immune disorder is called an opportunistic infections. Another type of immune system disorder is cancer. Cancer cells are present in the body. The immune system kills the cells without us even knowing. Cancer is when corrupted cells spread uncontrollably. It can appear anywhere in the body, meaning there are hundreds of types of cancer cells. Cancer cells become individual organisms to the immune system cells. Sometimes they can multiply uncontrollably, which leads to destroying the organs unintentionally. Categories of acquired immunity including natural, artificial, passive and active. There are 4 types of immunity. Natural. Natural immunity is when you encounter a germ and the body creates antibodies. When getting the germ, you can become very sick. However, if you encounter the germ again, the body has antibodies ready to kill it. This means that you become less likely to get the germ again. Artificial. This type of immunity is when the body is given small quantities of the disease. The most common way of artificial immunity is vaccinations. This is classified as an active immunity. Artificial can be active or passive immunity. Passive. The passive form is adding antibodies into the system when a person is already infected with a disease or infection to relieve the symptoms. The next time an individual gets the disease, it will be less harmful. This is due to the memory cells. Active. Active immunity happens when a disease organism triggers the immune system to produce antibodies. Active immunity can happen through artificial or natural immunity. Immune responses to a vaccination including immunological memory. Here is a diagram of immunological memory. The immune system consists of B lymphocytes and T lymphocytes. B cells produce antibodies to fight an infection. T cells recognise and kill the cells infected. Vaccines transfer antigens into the body which triggers the B and T cells. The body isn't infected by the vaccine, however it tricks the immune system into thinking that it is. This can result in a fever, which is a proactive response against the pathogen. Natural infections and vaccines can create immunological memory. There are memory B and T cells. This means that if a person was to become infected again, the immune system would recognise the pathogens and be ready to fight it with specific antigens. Concept of herd immunity, vaccination programs and factors affecting the vaccine uptake. Concept of herd immunity. According to the Mayo Clinic 2020, states that herd immunity is the name for the point in time when it is hard for a disease to spread through a group of people. Measles is an example of herd immunity due to a large amount of people with the vaccine compared to those without it. Vaccine programs, also known as an immunisation program. This is when a range of specific immunisations are given through different periods of life. In life. This is known as a schedule. Immunisation range from birth into adulthood. For example, you may have your MMR vaccine as a baby and your booster as a teenager. Factors affecting the vaccine uptakes. Parents' uncertainty and fear of giving their children a vaccine is a main factor. This is because even though the risk of not having the vaccine motivates people to have it, it's also a risk of what the vaccine can do to affects the vaccine's uptakes. Another factor is values and attitudes, such as certain religions, physiological approaches and beliefs, and people's believing in the body should always stay pure. Other factors are location, time and cost, and physical accessibility to a vaccination service. Not everyone has the opportunity to go and get a vaccine. Benefits of vaccinations. Firstly, vaccinations prepare the body for foreign entities, which means that it protects the body for a longer amount of time. And when the body encounters these foreign entities again, the body will know how to fight it. Vaccinations don't just protect an individual, they also protect a whole community, which is another benefit of them. Just like measles, more people had the measles vaccine, whereas compared to those who didn't, which means that a whole community was protected because the disease couldn't spread through the large group of people. According to the European Centre of Disease Prevention and Control 2024, vaccination is considered as one of the most cost-effective public health interventions as it prevents the costs associated with treating and caring for people who become ill. This is another benefit. Some vaccinations can also lead to the eradication of a disease. This is like smallpox. They can also eliminate diseases, which means that the disease in a specific area can be contained and reduced for an outbreak in the world. According to Rodriguez and Plotkin 2020, it's estimated that vaccines have prevented 6 million deaths from vaccines preventable disease annually. By 2055, The Earth's population is estimated to reach almost 10 billion, a feat that in part is due to the effective vaccines that prevent disease and prolong life expectancy across all continents. Thank you for listening.